Hi, welcome to The Poor Show. I'm Thomas Haney, and this marks the first episode of our web series. Some of you might remember the name Poor as being associated as a young men's summer camp that we did a few years back in New Bern, North Carolina. Well, this year, God has not left me alone about it, and He's given me a new spin on the vision. Because Poor is more than just about a summer camp. It's really about authentically pouring manhood into the next generation. Now, what do I mean by that? Pouring manhood into the next generation. So, when we started this, we had a summer camp and we had a bunch of young men come out and we ran through a series of obstacle courses and challenges, and then we sat them down and we talked to them about life, we talked to them about relationships, we talked to them about love, we talked to them about work ethic, integrity, even some deeper topics like pornography and how to live a godly life as a man. As I was meditating on it more, I realized that young men need a guide even after they reach the age of what we see as manhood is 18. But a lot of times if we can look back over our lives, we realize that it didn't exactly happen at 18. For some, they had to step up and be a man sooner because of life events. And others, it took a little bit longer. But whatever the case, there are some tools and there are some resources and wisdom in the older generations that if we could just glean from, we can live a better, more productive life, and we can overcome challenges that others have already figured out the solution to, and have more strength and encouragement to live our lives as we're called to. So that's the essence of Poor. Now, when we were at that summer camp, I realized that we had achieved our objective during the second year. We had rented this giant bounce house, and all the kids had played on it all day long. They were tired, they were sweaty, and I looked over, and they were all in the back of the pool. And one of the elders was sitting there and he was just talking to them. They were all just ears open, just listening. And when I saw that, I realized we had achieved what we wanted. There was this transference of knowledge that was occurring. The young men's hearts were open to receive it. We had built up the trust. We had established the relationship. And then the older generation was there pouring out. You can think like when you're sitting with your dad fishing and he just starts talking to you, or maybe you're riding in the car, or maybe you haven't had that experience from your father because of life circumstance, but maybe you had it from an uncle, a mentor, or another guy in the neighborhood. We just naturally want to pour out wisdom and teach the next generation how to live as men. And so that's what it's all about. And so I'm excited to announce this new web series. It's particularly special because my dad, I hadn't seen him in about 2 years because of COVID-19. He was able to come down this past month and be a part of it. And so for the first episode, we're showing a conversation. I would call it an interview, but it's more of a conversation, and it's intended that we can all glean from it. And so I encourage you to watch, I encourage you to share it as you learn from it. Older men, invite your sons to watch it with you. Or even if you're a single mom, invite your son to watch it with you. Or an older brother, invite your younger brother or your friends to watch it with you, and then generate some conversation. Share your own stories about manhood and the things that God has brought you through. And I believe that when we do it, it's not just going to be a transfer of wisdom, but there's going to be a transference of manhood that occurs. So I'm excited. Enjoy the show. Consider this. In life, we're like these two glasses. As young men, we're the smaller glass. Not because we're smaller in stature or anything like that, but we haven't been alive as long. As older men, we've experienced some of the throes of life and some of the challenges that come with fatherhood, that come with being married and all these other dynamics that approach. Now notice, the young man's glass isn't empty because he's learned some things along the course of his life. He has some skills, he's experienced some challenges and some battles of his own. But then when we go to the older man, look how much more life he's lived. He's also not full because he's still got more life to live. But he has so much more wisdom, knowledge, ability. And if we could just transfer it into the younger generation, how much more equipped will they be to face life's challenges? The challenge becomes, how do we do the transfer? And I noticed, thinking back, that a lot of my life was shaped during conversation. A lot of my values were formed as talking to the older men. And so when we do that, we begin to tip the cup and pull on the wisdom that they have on the side of them and receive it for ourselves. The Bible says, counsel in the heart of man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. So as young men, we need to be in position to receive and ask the key questions to draw it out of the older generation. That's what Pour is about. Enjoy today's show. Well, I tell you, today is such a beautiful day in Florida.
Sure is. Gorgeous here.
I'm so glad to have you on the show, and I just want to introduce you to our guest audience and say welcome to my dad, Cecil Haney, to the show. He's known throughout the military and in civilian life for many accolades, but today I'm inviting him on as dad/grandpa.
That is the best status one can be, a dad and a grandpa.
All right, so as you've had an opportunity to come down and engage with the kids for the week and it really just be a week of just special time and great memories, is there a favorite moment you've had?
Well, had many favorite moments, but probably the best moment I had was when I came through the door, and being that the grandsons did not know I was coming, seeing the surprise on their face and hearing them yell out "Grandpa" was the most precious moment. Many following that, just seeing them play, run, and enjoy life.
Yeah, this has been a really special week. It's been a long time with COVID. You know, everybody's kind of felt those effects, and I think the family effects are the hardest ones hit. And so for them to be able to see in person, well, for all of us really, I've had a great time this week too. It's been so special, and I haven't seen them smile this much. They smile a lot, but they're constantly smiling now. I can't wait to see you every day, and just so excited. So this has been a special week.
Well, I'm excited right along with them. It's great to see all of you here. COVID has had us locked down for quite some time, and just to be able to get a hug from family is precious.
Oh yes, a full, real-size hug, not virtual. It's been great. So, on today's episode, as I was meditating on, what to make it about, what should be the key concept of today's lesson, I wanted to focus it on manhood, and I think authentic manhood. And the reason for that is I've noticed that ages 15 to 30, although in our culture we mark 18 as that's okay, now you're an adult, now you're a man, or for the women, now you're a woman. For some it takes a little longer.
Absolutely.
And for some it's a little sooner. I mean, we got people who've had kids at like 15 and they got to step up. And so in that, I wanted to ask you the question because not everybody knows this. And some that, even though as men we don't ask the question all the time vocally, we'll show it in our actions. And so we'll try to compensate because we're asking this question on the inside. And so I have two questions for you. The first one, what does it mean to be a man?
Wow. That's probably one I don't get a lot, but an important one. I think one is to understand that as a man, you have responsibilities that are different. And while they're outlined, for example, biblically, I think the business of being responsible and recognizing where the buck stops in terms of how things will go in your own life, as well as those associated with your family. Whether you're married or not, you still have responsibilities. You may be helping to take care of your mother, who may be living alone, or a father, or a sick sibling. And to recognize that you have a role in that as a responsible individual, you can't just throw away that role. You have to man up, so to speak.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. I'm gonna remember that, responsible. And I was thinking about this too. It's like I can't necessarily pinpoint the time that I crossed that threshold because I think it's a progressive process. But it's like I woke up one day and I was like, wow, I have a wife and 3 kids. I'm suddenly responsible for other people's lives. I don't want to mess this thing up. So as young men, we go through that transition. How do you know when you've crossed that threshold from being a boy into a man?
Well, that's another one that I think it happens. I don't think you can just say it was at this particular moment. I think, for me, it was when I did leave home for college and knew that it was my responsibility to make it through the college, and I wasn't going to get any help from parents or what have you in that regard. that I had to be responsible for myself, because I came from a family that wasn't in abundance of money and anything like that. So you had to take your precious resources and use them responsibly. And as such, that was probably one moment. The other moment was getting married and recognizing that you were taking on a partner that you had a role in, and you wanted nothing but to protect that individual, provide for her, love her as best you could with your own, each one of us aren't perfect. We have our own problems, but to make sure things went well, and particularly in my case, leaving my bride at home while going to sea, to make sure everything was as prepared for as possible before leaving for long periods of time.
Wow. I know that had to be tough, to have a young bride and a young marriage, and then to have to go get deployed for, I'm not sure. I remember the ones when I was a kid were sometimes 6 months or, maybe a little bit longer or less, but that had to be challenging. How did you approach that?
Well, number one, I always had confidence that my bride Bonnie would take care of things. She's a very capable lady in that regard. But you really knew that your responsibility was to do as best you could in your job, since you were going to leave for that period of time, so that you could come back regardless of whatever that mission was, and be able to enjoy the family. And while it was always not joyful as far as having that departure, particularly the day you left, but you knew from the day you left you were getting shorter to the day you were coming back, and that of course really helped you prepare mentally to do what you needed to do in that regard.
That's good wisdom, because I know a lot of our viewers are probably in the military, because that's a lot of who I've been connected to in life, and they struggle with that a little bit. I see a lot of young families struggle, or even when they're home, picking up that dynamic. We recently talked to a couple about roles of men and women, and there's the traditional roles, but as we're seeing society change, or sometimes you have unique challenges like being deployed, the roles don't necessarily fit your situation. How did you and Mom figure out those roles together so that they worked? Because you come back home and all of a sudden, okay, you're here, where she may have been taking on everything in the interim.
Well, number one, you'd find in a lot of cases the spouses Miss Bonnie would really figure out how to run the family with you or without you. And the real key was not coming back and deciding, okay, now I'm in charge, when you haven't been there for so many days, months, as you mentioned. So your first piece was, how do I assimilate into my family in such a way that I don't disturb the momentum they've already been working on establishing. So we had our own mechanisms. We didn't have the internet that you have today when I first started out. We did in my latter days of going to sea. But during that time frame, we both kept a journal of what was going on, and what we felt and what have you. And then when I got back, we would swap journals.
Wow.
And those journals in themselves were just illuminating. It would be things like what she was going through in a day. The washer broke, but boy, we had fun doing this and that with the children, because she was really high on how well her children were doing.
Wow. So this is really special. And the crazy thing is, and our viewers don't know this either, but because I never knew that about the journal. But when I travel, what I learned to do is that year that I was on crazy travel, like every couple of weeks I was going somewhere, I started making a journal that I would bring back to Cherise, and I would give her, just talking about the day, talking about who I met. And that was something that helped keep us together and keep our love strong, because it's so difficult when you're away a lot, and then to come back and just to deal with those absences, yet still build your relationships. Wow.
No, it's funny, because you would do the same thing. Toward the end, when I was more senior, we finally got internet capability, but we couldn't use it because I was on a submarine, and most of the time you were not transmitting things. But when you got close to a port or in port, you would. And then we would similarly do that journal electronically, and then we would receive an series of emails of days, and you'd have to go back from the beginning went on to see what was going on. Before we had internet, we actually had this thing called a familygram, and I couldn't transmit to her, but she could write somewhere in the order of about 30 words, and it would go into our headquarters, and from there it would be radio transmitted to the submarine in a way that we would receive it but not have to transmit to get it. And as a result, you would get these, and they were always cute, Thomas did this in school today.
There was a lot of that.
For example. But the art of communications, which you mentioned, is so important in a relationship. And to have real communications of what happens that's fun and good, what do we struggle with, and that kind of thing. I was always blessed that we had a relationship where we could talk about things. And that piece is so important in any relationship.
Oh, I love it. These are good nuggets that we can all take as men and take back into our relationships to help us.
Yeah, because sometimes we feel as men, or we're sort of wired, I should say, sometimes the world puts an expectation that we shouldn't show our feelings, or, we have to have a certain machoism and that kind of thing. But the art of communications is deep. You have to be able to share how you're really feeling, what perturbs you, what doesn't, and those kind of things. And if you can do it on a continuous basis, I think it really propels a marriage, a relationship, and what have you.
That's a good lesson. So take notes, guys. Art of communication. It's going to help you. It's helped me a lot through the years.
And I started off, I sucked at it. I was not good. She was. And consequently, over time, I got better and better and better at it in that regard. So I went from being a very quiet husband to being, where, okay, it's my time to talk.
Oh, I love it. I love seeing the relational points, because I can say that Charisse has helped me become a better husband through the years, because she excelled at communication and expressing feelings, and I did not do so well in that. So it's also a good way to remember to listen to our wives.
Very important too. Listening is an important skill to develop, and really listen. Not just, okay, I got that, because you think you know what she's going to say next. But to really take the time to listen, and when you don't understand, to ask. But there was one other facet that helped me out a lot, because I knew, and she knew, that sometimes my mind would drift to, thinking about this, that on the job, or even leaps in time ahead. And she would be talking about something, and I got better and better at saying, oops, stop, I didn't connect to that. Can we repeat that again? So that I could make sure I wasn't missing it and not just assuming I got it.
I like that strategic pause, because I know I've fallen into that trap myself and assuming that I understood and I was way off base. So I can shift a little bit. And speaking about communication, if I think back over our childhood, you had some really good methods of communicating with us kids and getting us to connect with you. Because a lot of times, a lot of parents, it's like, oh, how do I talk to my kids, particularly when they get into the teenage years and they start to shut that door a little bit? How do we maintain those connections and develop a way that they can bring us stuff? Do you have any insights you can share with us?
Well, interesting enough, the Navy perhaps helped me a little bit with that, because when you have the construct of a crew, you have a lot of young folks that you're also trying to work with and you're trying to communicate with, to let you know what they're having trouble with, not just on the job, but also sometimes on the home front, so you can get them off so that they can work it or provide them whatever they need in special counseling. So that forced me a bit in terms of how do I get people to talk to you, so to speak. I think the same thing I can say looking at the family life. Practicing that there, I took certain nuggets back to work, and I would try it both ways. Can't say I was an ace at it, but it's something that requires patience, and it requires you not to get upset when you're not getting what you want to hear, and just trying to realize, what is that person, that child, interested in? and then talking to them about that, and then moving on. I remember one time with you were working on the Japanese caricatures of the letters and what have you. And I'd been to Japan, but I hadn't learned any of that. And, to come over and say, hey, what are you doing there? What does that mean? And you were able to open up and share, Dad doesn't know this, but I do. Not that you had that attitude, but it is when people sense that you value their insights and opinions, that's when they really open up and talk to you.
That's good wisdom. Because even our little kids here, if you show interest in whatever they're doing, whether it be building a Lego or building a race car set, they just automatically lighten up, and then they just open up and just share everything in their heart. Sometimes more than you can handle.
It is funny to see them light up in that regard. And people, I feel, the more they sense you truly value them, the more they're willing to make that connection. But it requires energy and it requires patience to try different things, because the first time you try it, you may fall flat on your face in terms of being successful in that art. But to just keep looking and observing and seeing what they are interested in, whether it's a book they're reading, whether it's something they want to watch on TV, whether it's something that they like experiencing, walking in a park or what have you, to really do as much of that as possible to cement that relationship.
Oh, great. So for our viewers, remember, keen interest, authentic interest in some of the things that your kids and your spouse even are doing. It'll go a world away in communication.
Absolutely.
So, as you've progressed through the years, is there... I've noticed that you've always been strong in being involved in the community. Even though you might be gone sometimes, when you came back, we were always active in church. We would help out with whatever was going on. If it was doing the lawn or going on hiking trips with the youth group. I remember a lot of those moments.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite ways to be involved in the community now?
Well, a lot of my community work involves working with my church back at home and the activities that they are involved in. So, for example, we do food drives for collecting food and distributing it for those in need. Really important as we locked down for COVID, as there were so many people in the community needing help in that regard. So, and as such, it was good also for our church membership, because there was a group of us that really got to connect so much better because we were working this together in that regard. When COVID started and everything stopped and we had to go virtual, I ended up working with the team to decide what kind of system we were going to use so that we could continue an interactive type church service and everything else that goes with it, from Bible studies to Sunday schools and other meetings, and not miss a beat once we realized this was something that wasn't going to just turn itself around right away. So you have that piece. The other part in the community is where you sense need. I mean, sometimes we would go around, my daughter and I, and just pick up trash in the neighborhood. We've had some that were church drive, but there were some we were just walking around. It's interesting sometimes when you do that, the response of others in the community. I remember one part we were walking along picking up trash by this field, and 3 kids were playing soccer. And they had lived across the street from where they were playing soccer from. And we'd see them from time to time, but we didn't know them. And they saw us picking up trash. They stopped and they ran around and picked up trash to put in our bin when we were walking around. It's that kind of thing that I find electrifying, when you can connect to your community in whatever way that you have your God-given gifts and strengths to. And sometimes it's just stopping, saying hello and how's your day, in terms of things. Stores you visit in your community, you have the same people that work there, stopping to understand what's going on in their lives. And sometimes you find, boy, they need help in a way, or they just enjoy the fact, and they look up and say, somebody asked about me. Instead of the other way, where we are sort of a society sometimes with give me versus giving.
No, I love it. And I love the example you gave of the picking up trash and then the children seeing that and then jumping in there. I've been reading a couple books about ministry and building churches, and one of the ones was talking about engaging in the domains in your community and just focusing on serving and helping others, and then the people will come. And so I'm really seeing that in your example. Along those lines, are there any books you're reading now that you would recommend to us to check out that could edify our lives?
Oh, wow. Yes. Well, one, there's so many books that I'm reading at the moment here, and now I've got to stop and think of what they are. One book I'm reading is called Caste, C-A-S-T-E, and it talks about caste systems in our history. Black America, Jews versus Germany, India, and it uses these examples to talk about human nature and how we should learn from these so that we can improve as we go forward. So that's one that I'm reading right now. There's another book, I'm trying to think of its name, but it talks about how different organizations have been successful. I'll have to give you that name of that book because I just can't think of it right now. And what's neat about it is the examples are everything from, you would expect corporations, but some of them are about basketball teams and what have you that have had success. And the author here has done some analytical work, and what he shows in this book of how important it is to have real connections with those folks that work for you or with you in such a way that with that you can make it through bad days and still keep the ball rolling because they know you are interested, you care, and what have you. So it's a fantastic book, and it's one that I'm going to start passing out to leaders in particular, because I think it's important because of its broad breadth, but it really gets to that business of having authentic, genuine interest, and even when the chips are down, you take the time to really continue to work with that team and not just get in frustrated. And because when you get frustrated, everybody else gets frustrated, and nothing good occurs in that regard. I'm reading a lot of the Bible, and it's been sort of neat being in my retired, or I could say quasi-retired, because I still do some consulting work. But it's been the ability to first attend Bible study on Wednesday nights, and then eventually I became the leader of the Bible study. But in such, I would always do more in-depth reading. So we did the book of Isaiah not too long ago, and really spent some time in extra books so that I could bring extra things to what does this mean? Why was this relevant during this particular time period and what have you? And then what does it mean to us in the period that we're in? Kind of things. And a lot of them, sometimes people say, well, the Bible, I don't want to read the Bible. Blah. It's amazing how much is in there on how to live.
Yep.
And those things are just full of golden nuggets in which our approach of how we live in today's world. So with that, I have several books, including some of my own devotionals. And when you start reading a devotional and it tells you to go to this part of the Bible, then you go and you start reading that, and that gives you a much longer read in time. And the fourth book, I might say, I've always been worried about being a dinosaur regarding technology. And because I do work with some training, particularly when we went into the Zoom world, virtual world for church, of working with some of the folks that were older than me in how to get to Zoom even on the computer, how to work the website, how to get to be able to interact, whether in rooms or whether in an open forum or what have you. Just the art of opening a microphone or not may sound easy for us, but not necessarily for them. So one book I'm reading talks about the IT world, and it's really about the United States and China. It's another book I'd have to give you the real title of, but it's one that really gets into the information technology world of how both countries in this competition that they're in, how things are playing out there. But it's been a wonderful history book for me in terms of understanding both how our Silicon Valley has worked to innovate and what have you, to how that has permeated around the world, including a nation like China.
Well, that's good. I'm going to have to get those books myself. And for our viewers, I'll put them in the comments section once I get all the titles so that you can check them out too. I'm a big advocate for reading as much as you can, because there's so much wisdom, knowledge, excitement in books. And frankly, I just love to read because there's just so much goodness in there, especially the Bible. So I appreciate you for sharing those. We're about out of time for the day, so we'll definitely have to have you back on the show again.
Well, I think this is a wonderful idea, and as you've described it to me, and I wish you and the audience success going forward here, and I hope and pray that you will be able to interact through this and have success, because it's so important that we man up going forward.
Well, thank you so much. Remember, guys, it's important that we man up. I like that. I'm a Bart. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, son.
Oh, no, that was a great conversation. You know, the funny thing is, there were so many things I learned, and I've talked to my dad a lot through the years, but I learned some new things about him during this interview. And really the most special moment for me is when I found out that both him and I used to write journals to our wives when we were away. I never knew my dad did it. And so there's so many special things that you can discover just from a conversation. That was awesome. And I'm so grateful for the tools that he left us with. Speaking of tools, when my dad left, he left me this tool. And as a son, you know, there's something special about when your father leaves you a tool. And maybe your dad's not into, handyman kind of stuff. Maybe he's a cook, a chef. Maybe he left you a series of spices, a spatula. I don't know. Anything that your dad, or a watch, leaves you with becomes special. This is special because my dad actually taught me how to strip my first set of wires. And he had bought it because he was working on a train that he had brought to share with my sons. And just like this tool, he gave us some spiritual tools, some natural tools that we can use for our marriages, for our life, for raising our kids, for excelling in our academics, whatever it may be. And now it's up to us that he's given us the tool to use it. So I challenge you to pick out some tools that you learned from the lesson this week and use them. And then share them with another person. If you have a tool, you have something that you can share with someone of the younger generation. Even if you're 15, 16 years old, you might have a little brother that you can teach something. That's what Pour is about. I want you to keep it going. Don't just stop at watching the interview, but put some momentum behind it. And I believe that as we do this, we're going to build relationships, we're going to build connections, and we're going to grow stronger together as men. It's going to be awesome. I love it. If you like the video, please like it, please share it. Send it to someone on your social media so that they can glean from it too. And then give me some feedback. If you have some more questions for my dad, put them in the comments. Send me an email. I would love to ask him and do a follow-up for you guys. If you're watching this and something is burning on your heart and you're like, man, I love this Pour idea. It's a great vision. I want to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. Well, hey, I got room for you on my team. Shoot me an email. I would love to talk to you about it. All right, you guys have a great day, and let's continue to pour.